In this video, we'll talk about scientific notation. Now, this is a way for us to talk about really large and really small numbers and compact them so we don't have to look at all the digits. On a calculator, when it runs out of space, it puts the number in scientific notation, and it uses this capital E to represent the times 10 raised to that exponent. When we write it in scientific notation, we're going to have a coefficient times 10 raised to some integer. The key to remember is that our coefficient has to be between 1 and 10. So if I look at these four examples, and I want to know, is it in scientific notation? This first one, my coefficient is between 1 and 10, and that's an integer exponent, so yes. My second one, 13 and 7/10 is not between 1 and 10, so no, that is not scientific notation. My third one here, 3 and 2/10, that's a coefficient between 1 and 10, and -5 is an integer, so yes. Here, 56/100 is not between 1 and 10, so no, this is not scientific notation. Now, if I need to convert a decimal notation into scientific notation, I'm going to identify where's my decimal. I'm going to move it so that my number is between 1 and 10, and how many times I moved it will tell me what my exponent will be in scientific notation. So let's look at the number 923,457. I know that my decimal is right here after the 7. I'm now going to move it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. So that's a positive 5 since I moved it to the left, which means then that in scientific notation, I have 9 and 23,457 hundred thousandths times 10 raised to the positive fifth. Well, what if it is a decimal value? Same type of thing. I start with that number. I have my decimal. I'm going to move it so that my new coefficient will be between 1 and 10. So I need to move it right after that 3. So it moves 1, 2, 3 times, and I moved it to the right, so that's going to be an exponent of -3. So that means in this case, I have 3 and 67 hundredths times 10 to the -3rd. Now, what if I want to go the other way and start with scientific notation and convert to decimal notation? I'm going to start with my coefficient, and then I'm going to use my exponent to help me shift the decimals so that I get my entire number. So here I have 2 and 75 thousandths times 10 to the 7th. That means I'm going to move my decimal to the right 7 times. So 1, 2, 3. Well, I'm out of zeros and places to go, so I need to add zeros as I go along. 4, 5, 6, 7. Now I can write that number out, put in my commas to help me recognize the size of this number, and I will see that that's 20,750,000. I can do the same thing again with small numbers, with negative exponents. So here, I'm going to start with the decimal after the 3. Because it's negative, I'm going to move it to the left. So I move it 1, and I'm going to move it again, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now I have that entire number written out where I've got the 4 zeros and then the 3001. And I put a 0 in the ones place just because it helps to represent where's the ones place and where's my decimal that separates. Now, if I need to compare numbers, the best thing to do is put them in the same notation. Whether you want to move them both to decimal notation or to scientific notation, that is your choice. For example, if I want to know what's greater, 90,456 or 9 and 75 hundredths times 10 to the 3rd, in this case, I'm going to convert my scientific notation over to decimal notation. And that would show me that the number is actually 9,750. That's smaller. So in this case, 90,456 is greater than 9,750, which was the 9 75 hundredths times 10 to the 3rd. In this case, where I've got 4 numbers and I want to order them from least to greatest, I have some in decimal notation and some that are in scientific notation. In this case, I'm going to convert my decimals over to scientific notation because it's easy to compare those exponents. So 81 thousandths becomes 8 and 1/10 times 10 to the -2. And then when I've got 10,500 thousandths, that's 1 and 5 10,000ths times 10 to the -1. Now I can look at these numbers and compare, and I'm going to go least to greatest. So the smaller the more negative my exponent, I know that'll be my least number. So then I will go here with my 1 and 8/10 times 10 to the -3, then my 2 and 3/10 times 10 to the -3, and then say, okay, negative 2 is my next exponent, so that'd be the 81 thousandths. And then I would have my 10,500 thousandths. Now, let's also talk about what if I need to multiply or divide in scientific notation. I start with my coefficients, I multiply them together. I add my exponents, and then if I need to, I may have to shift 1 or 2 places my decimals to make sure that I have it in scientific notation. So say I have 3 1/10 times 10 to the 5th times 4 5/10 times 10 squared. I'm going to multiply my coefficients. So it's 3 1/10 times 4 5/10, which is 13 95 hundredths. Now I'm going to add my exponents. 5 plus 2 is 7. That would give me 13 95 hundredths times 10 to the 7th. Well, the problem is that's not scientific notation. I need to move my decimal 1 place to the left. And when I move my decimal 1 place to the left, remember that adds an exponent. So this case, it's 1 395 thousandths times 10 to the 8th. And if I divide, I'm going to be doing the same thing. I'm going to be dividing my coefficients. I'll be subtracting my exponents this time since it's division, and then I may need to move my decimal 1 place, depending on how my numbers work out. So let's say I had 2 7/10 times 10 to the 3rd divided by 4 5/10 times 10 to the 8th. I'm going to start with my coefficients. 2 7/10 divided by 4 5/10 is 6/10. And then 3 minus 8 gives me negative 5. So I have an exponent that's a negative 5. So if I look at it, if I take those two parts and write in scientific notation, I have 6/10 times 10 to the negative 5th. The problem is I'm not in scientific notation. I need to move this decimal 1 place to the right, and that'll give me 6 times 10 to the negative 6.